Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. I hope you guys are having a fantastic Monday. Well, as good as a Monday can possibly be for you, likely. And you can move forward with the rest of your week, hopefully play some good games along the way. We're, of course, in the holiday season, depending on the multiple holidays or holidays that exist that you might be celebrating. So I hope you're getting the opportunity to spend a lot of time with friends and family, whether it be over video games or just other things that make you happy in a time when happiness might seem far and few. Hopefully you're finding plenty of ways to find that happiness and to engage in it. And we're gonna talk about some happiness today, because we're gonna talk a little bit about the time that I spent with the Monster Hunter World beta over on the PlayStation 4 this week. And I managed to squeeze in about 3 hours, most of it solo and a little bit of it in 2-player co-op with Butterbar, who has even less knowledge of Monster Hunter than I do. Nonetheless, I can say that I had a really good time. The thing about Monster Hunter for me is that I've been aware of Monster Hunter. I know quite a bit about Monster Hunter, and I have for a very long time now. It's a game that's been in my life for one way or another, even though I've never actually fully played it. And the reason for that is this thing right here. When I look at a game like Monster Hunter, I don't exactly think to myself, I really want to play that on a platform like the Nintendo 3DS. It's such a full-blown RPG experience. It has so many layers, so much depth to it, that it doesn't really lend itself to the pick-up-and-play format that I personally prefer when it comes to handheld devices like this, which is why when they re-released, Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll buy that, but do I really want to play Ocarina of Time on a handheld device when I could just emulate it or actually play it on my N64? So for me personally, that's been a barrier. And I know that might sound silly, but when I pick up my 3DS or my Vita, when I put my Switch in mobile mode and take it out of the dock, I don't play Super Mario Odyssey. I don't play Breath of the Wild. If I'm sitting in the car, maybe waiting for Michelle for a doctor's appointment or something like that, I break out like Binding of Isaac. I play games that are more attuned to, that handheld nature. Because when I was growing up with handheld games, those are the types of games I played, Pokemon and things that fit on a small mobile platform. So even though I think it's quite the feat that Monster Hunter's been so successful over the years on a handheld device, it made it very difficult for me to get involved with it. I just felt like it deserved the big screen. So of course, when I heard that Monster Hunter World was coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox, and eventually PC, I was like, holy crap, this is the opportunity, not just to dive into Monster Hunter for myself, but to also have Monster Hunter exist on a platform where I can play with my friends who I feel would really love Monster Hunter, but they don't have 3DSs, and they're not interested in playing on a handheld platform either. So really, for me, playing Monster Hunter World for the first time was just verifying things I already knew and felt I would enjoy when it came to the Monster Hunter franchise, but in the latest possible iteration. And I can say that all of my expectations were met, and then some. So, the first thing you have to know about Monster Hunter, for those of you who maybe have no idea what Monster Hunter is that it is a rather deep game. There's a lot of layers and mechanics to it. There's a lot of items in the game, I guess is the best way you could put it. And a lot of those items are mechanics within themselves. For instance, in Monster Hunter World, we have like a cloak type system, kind of a cape system. There's like a ghillie cloak, for example, that allows you to hide from enemies. There's one that prevents you from gaining negative status effects like water blight. That right there, just those two sentences should say more than enough to know that, yeah, this is a deep experience. There's going to be a lot you have to learn. There's a lot to wrap your head around. But that's the value of a game like Monster Hunter. There's a lot of games in the market that are really straightforward. And I think especially in the modern era, when a lot of developers and publishers are trying to appeal to the largest possible audience, I love a game like Monster Hunter so very much. A game that says, we're gonna try and make the game accessible, but don't expect us to remove parts of the game just for the sake of attracting another million players. We're not really concerned about that. We're happy with our player base. Our game is profitable each and every year because we have a smart budget built around our sales numbers, and therefore we can make a game that has 20 different weapon types that are all very diverse, that have their own special mechanics. Some cater to a more hardcore part of the audience, some cater to the newer players. We've got ranged weapons thrown into the mix. I love that. I love being able to go to the training area, which I'm so glad they included in the beta. I thought this was a great addition, and just scroll through all of the different weapon sets and grab the bow and grab, you know, a big two-handed great sword, grab like the small cleavers, the sword and the axes, and mess around with the different combos and get a feel for how a lot of the game's mechanics work. I think even though I don't fit the bill for like a player who would typically be overwhelmed by this type of an experience, I think that training area with a little bit of an introduction tutorial in the full release will do enough to get players who have never played Monster Hunter started off on the right foot, where they can at least figure things out from there. And considering how easy I found the first boss fight, the first monster fight, I guess you could say, the beginner fight inside of the beta, I think a lot of players would be able to get into the fray and feel like they can accomplish something, which I think that's a really important hook long term then. Once a player has completed something, they can be faced with the next task that might be the next monster and be completely annihilated by it, but because they already saw success once, they're more likely to hunt down the answers they need to find success again. And honestly, that's how I felt. Even though I got absolutely trashed by the intermediate monster when trying to play with Butterbar, I was already experimenting with different weapons and the traps I started using. I started using my slingshot to make use of things like the paralysis knife, and you know, the puzzle pieces were starting to fall into place. And that is, I think, one of the most exciting things about a very deep game like Monster Hunter, is that you are constantly learning as a new player. You're figuring out how these things work, and you're realizing that all of these mechanics, all these little bits and pieces, these potions and these items, they don't exist just for the sake of existing. They all can genuinely have an influence on the outcome of your success of any given monster hunt. And that's really freaking cool. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about the weapon diversity and the variety in Monster Hunter. You know, you've got ranged weapons, multiple ranged weapons, multiple melee weapons. Again, I like how there are easier weapons and more challenging weapons. That gives you a lot of ways to play the game. I like games that make the most out of one weapon, right? So if I equip, let's just say I go with that big cleaver, the first great sword. You know, I can spend probably 10, 30, 40, maybe 100 hours just using that weapon and developing a level of mastery for it. I think the one thing that new players are going to have to overcome is the feeling that a lot of the bigger weapons especially are clunky. But honestly, the more time I spent with some of the big weapons, the less clunky I felt they were. It was more a matter of just getting your timing down and understanding that this is a huge piece of metal. And while my dude may be a professional monster hunter, or at least on his way to becoming a professional monster hunter, he's not a god. He's not Zeus. He's not wearing Mjolnir armor. He's not Spartan, 117. He's the freaking monster hunter. This is a big sword. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of stamina to swing this thing. So you've got to, work on stamina management. You've got to work on your attack. You got to be able to really pull it together to make the most of each and every attack. So I never felt like the game was clunky. There are definitely instances where I think the lock-on system is clunky, and that's something I'd love to see them polish up a little bit more before the full release. But let's go ahead and move forward and talk about the thing that surprised me most about Monster Hunter. So again, when I said it met my expectations and then some, this is the and then some. I didn't expect the Monster Hunter world, the open portion of the game, to be so alive. While I had seen other Monster Hunter games, everything just kind of felt like it was there to make the world feel alive. But then when you actually play Monster Hunter World for the first time and you see the monster you're chasing eat another monster, and then you see the monster you're hunting in the second fight get attacked by another monster, and it's Godzilla versus Mothra right before your eyes, you realize just how alive that world is and how much that world actually connects with the monsters you might be hunting. But more importantly, how that world is going to influence the story you're going to have to tell as a player after each and every hunt. There's a very cinematic storytelling experience behind that open world in Monster Hunter, and that's really exciting. That like all the layers and the depth, that's fantastic. The fact that I'm gonna be able to, pick a certain weapon, load out a certain gear set to complement my friends when I play in co-op, that's all fantastic too. But having the monsters be so alive and so connected to the world that you hunt within makes it feel like you're in a real place. Even though these are like sort of instance areas where you're hunting a specific monster and you're on a timer, they feel like places I could spend hundreds upon hundreds of hours exploring. And I really do hope that there's more to the open worlds than just the timed hunts. Maybe that's something you Monster Hunter fans can let me in on how that works, because I mean, the first 2 zones I explored for the beginner and the intermediate hunt, I want to spend more time there. I want to walk around. I want to swing from some vines. I want to experience all the detail they've crafted into that world. But at the end of the day, there's no denying how the design of that world is going to affect your Monster Hunter stories. And I love the idea of great co-op games that let you tell a story that you can share time and time again, during the week with your friends. Friday came around, you got together for your Monster Hunter session, you're all sitting there, you take down that monster that you've been trying to defeat for the last 3 days, you finally came together as a team, you finished the fight, and now, during the week, when everybody's at work, you're like, dude, I still can't believe, do you remember when that monster came out of the ground and, ended up fighting our monster? Man, I don't think, if he hadn't done that damage, maybe we wouldn't have actually killed him. That I love that stuff. And the fact that I had one of those stories in my time just playing co-op with Butterbar was a pretty big indication that that's the sort of thing that Monster Hunter World's going to have in heaps and pounds. So, am I excited for Monster Hunter World? Yeah, can you tell? I can't wait for the full release. I'm really excited to play it on Xbox One with my little IRL group. I think it's going to be a game that we all end up falling deeply in love with. I could just see this being a game that we play for a long time coming. And, in the beta, you don't really get to dive into the progression system and, really get into the idea of gearing up and taking all the supplies. And then in a 4-player co-op environment, which I'm really looking forward to, having to distribute those supplies and make decisions on who does what. And, maybe I'll carry a bow, support you guys from range, and, somebody will be sort of the tanking character and he'll run the cloak so he can aggro monsters. There's so much going on in terms of cooperation that's going to take the Monster Hunter experience to the next level for me when I experience it in that environment for the first time. So I absolutely think Monster Hunter World is a game to keep an eye on. I think the world design was beautiful. They've managed to make a really atmospheric experience without having to blow the graphics over the top and make the game so it barely runs on a console platform. I thought it ran pretty well on the PlayStation 4 while the frame rate wasn't amazing. In the long term, if you want great frames, PC is going to be the place for this game. But nonetheless, I'm excited for it, and I hope eventually maybe they get around to an Xbox One and PC beta before both of those games release, before the game releases sometime next year. So I'd love to hear from you guys who played Monster Hunter for the first time with this beta. But I'd love to hear even more from you vets. How do you feel about Monster Hunter World? How does it compare to past Monster Hunter experiences? And tell me a little bit about your personal connection with Monster Hunter. How long have you been playing the franchise? What are some of the changes you've seen it make over the years? And does this Monster Hunter feel any more accessible to you than previous entries? Let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, remember to play smart. Remember to play to challenge yourself. But most importantly, remember to play for fun.